Hey guys, so this video is going to be an introduction to color work, specifically Fair Isle color work. When you're working with color work, you are going to be working from a chart that will be either a square or a rectangle. When you're working with those, you will start in the bottom right of the chart and you will work from the right side to left. So when you are knitting in the round, you will start at the beginning of your round. You'll work this way. Once you finish the round, you'll move up one block on the color work chart and then you'll work to the left again. And so what you'll have is, say you have 3 white, 1 red, 5 white, 1 red, etc. You'll complete that, then go to the next row, so 3 red, 1 white, 3 red, etc. Alright, so when you are introducing a color, when you have one color and you're about to start the second, what you're going to do is you're going to take your needle and you're going to go into that first stitch as though you were to knit it. Then you want to grab your other piece of yarn, and I make a little loop like this. I put it on to that other needle, pull it tight, and then pull that stitch through. So now you have one stitch that's in the new color. I then like to take the yarn on the back, so you have the end there, and then this side is connected to the ball. I like to take that and wrap it around the other yarn ones. That will just kind of help secure it and keep it in place. And that first stitch is also going to be a little loose. When you get back around to it, you can pull on the tail to tighten it up so it's normal. So now we are going to knit with the main color until our next stitch. Now it's time to do our next stitch in the other color. What you're going to do is put your needle in as though you were to knit. You're going to grab the yarn that's connected to the ball. You want to make sure that you pull these stitches out. So you're going to have lines on the back. They're called floats. And so what you want to do is make sure that you pull as much space here. It's better that the floats are a little too loose than a little too tight. So you will bring the yarn, wrap it around the needle, pull it through like a knit stitch. It is important when you're knitting with two colors that you try to keep the tension on your stitches as even as possible so that they will all look the same when you finish your work. So what you want to do when you're knitting is you want to make sure the first step is that when you're about to knit that next stitch, so you put your needle through, pull the work back so it stretches the stitches out. Then give a small tug on that last stitch that you knit with the other color so that that stitch remains as tight as the other stitches. You don't want to yank on it super hard, but just, so it's pulled in a little more firmly. You will knit that stitch and then go back to your other color. And you'll continue doing that until you knit all the stitches in the round and start the next round. What I like to do is I take the yarn that is going to have the most in this round. So with this round, mostly I'm knitting gray with some of the dark yarn mixed in. So I'm going to have the gray in my left hand, which is what I'm more comfortable with. And then I'm going to use the other color and I'm going to do a flicking motion in order to knit those stitches. It takes a little bit of practice, but once you get it fluid, it makes a lot more sense. So I'm going to knit one with the opposite direction. So I'm going to go as if to knit it. Like before, pull this back, pull that stitch a little bit, bring that forward, wrap it around, knit my stitch in the other color, bring that stitch around, knit my stitches in the main color, pull it back, flick that second color, knit my main color, pull it back, and flick my second color. It is important that every time that you are switching colors that you do pull on your work to spread the stitches apart so that you get your float spaced evenly. If you look at the back here, you can see that between each of the stitches, the yarn is sort of floating in the back of the work. And so it actually creates a really cool pattern when you finish it, seeing where the yarn floats in the back. When they are scrunched together, you can see that these sort of pop out like this. But what's important is that when your yarn, or when your work is stretched out like it'll be worn, that these floats go across the same amount as the stitches. If this is too tight, it's going to pull all your stitches together And when you look at it on the outside, it's going to look all squished, or some stitches will be smaller than others. You can see on this hat here, these are all spaced evenly, and you can see these floats on the inside. They are, you know, a little loose, and so that when the hat is worn and they're stretched out, there's just enough space for all the stitches that the stitches will look even when it's worn. But you can see that these stitches up here, I knit these a little too tightly. I didn't leave enough space for the floats in the back. So when these get pulled out now, when the hat is worn, these stitches look like they kind of disappear into the work because I didn't leave enough space for them. And it can happen that stitches kind of move around as you're knitting. You might tug on one of the floats or something like that. And the best way to correct color work is to grab the top and grab the bottom and give a little tug on those stitches. That will even it out. It'll pull yarn from either side of the float, and it'll help even them out a little bit. You can see with some of these, they're just a little too tight. But with other ones, you can see that depending on how the yarn was pulled, some of them actually will go back to normal. So for really long floats, there is a trick that you can do. So you can see that these floats down here are all shorter, and it's a lot easier to keep the tension even and to keep the floats from catching on anything. You can see the floats up here, however, are a lot longer in between. It's harder to get the spacing right, and you know, you could potentially snag these on something and it could pull the stitches. So there's a trick that I like to do, and I will show you what to do. So I just did a stitch in the opposite color, and I now have 9 stitches to go until I'm going to do that stitch again. So since 9 isn't exactly divisible by 2, we will do 5 and 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit halfway. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I get halfway, I'm going to pull the work. I'm going to take the yarn that is going to be the secondary color, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to wrap it around the other yarn. So I'm wrapping it around so that the two twist like this in the back. And I'm going to make sure I have it spaced out because it's better to have it too loose. And then I'm going to continue knitting the rest of the way to the other stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And now it's time to do that stitch. So I'm going to make sure I pull it out all the way. I'm going to put my needle in to pick up that stitch. I'm going to go in, wrap that stitch, and knit it. Now you'll see on the back here, instead of the float being all the way from here, it gets split into 2 and 2 so that the float matches better with all of the other stitches here. It's just wrapped around there. It's not in the yarn or anything, but it just helps hold it in place. You can't see it on the outside. This is really helpful. It'll help keep your tension more even, your stitches neater, and it will make it more comfortable when you wear the piece that you don't snag them on anything. Because I have definitely had that happen where I have a long float and I snag it on something and it takes me an hour and a half to fix all the color work. I hope this tutorial has been helpful. Do not hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or you need help with anything. I guess if there's a few key points to take away, it's to make sure that you stretch out your stitches before you knit your contrasting color. Make sure that you give a little tug on those stitches so that they're even with the other stitches. It's better to knit a little too loose than a little too tight. And don't be hard on yourself if it takes you a little while to get it perfect. You know, knitting takes a lot of practice, and it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay for things to not be perfect. Most of the time, honestly, we're the only ones who notice our mistakes anyway. Plus, when you have mistakes or, you know, little things, they make your knitting unique and they make it special. They don't necessarily ruin it, even if one thing isn't exactly perfect. All right, happy knitting, guys.